guest is Neil Usher. Neil is well known around the world as a leader in property, workplace, facilities, and organizational change, having overseen complex change initiatives in many regions and across a wide range of industries. He has developed a people-centric approach to business transformation. I actually think that's kind of where people end up anyway. I always think it's interesting the way that people end up. If you write about the workplace long enough, you will get into philosophy and psychology and anthropology as well.
Yeah,
So
you have to. You have to.
Neil was once a prolific blogger and writer, and he remains a commentator. He is also a regular speaker at conferences and academic events, and unarguably one of the most important voices in the world on the subject of the workplace, and the author of 5 published books. And it's a chapter in one of these books that is the subject of today's conversation. Comfort is one of the 12 elements of the elemental workplace from Neil's book of the same name. Neil, you say in the elemental workplace that because comfort is so personal, the challenge is to create the conditions for comfort rather than going straight for the issue itself. Could you expand on this?
Yeah, and thank you for the intro, Mark. Yes, comfort is entirely personal. So we have to create choice. We have to create options for occupants of space to be able to find what works for them. Something that's comfortable for one person is not necessarily going to be comfortable for another. So, but the basis of designing the modern workplace is one of creating choice, creating opportunity anyway. So realistically, we should be creating the conditions for comfort when we develop the design of our workplace anyway. If we're managing to create a whole series of work settings that occupants can choose from and they're all uncomfortable, we're doing something wrong.
But that's difficult because, of course, comfort's a very personal thing, isn't it? And I think something you touch on in the book is not just that it's personal, but that it's not necessarily what most people assume, which is like a lack of discomfort or something like that. You've got to be very careful about what you mean by it.
There's a lovely quote from the or one of the designers of the Aeron chair, Bill Stumpf, who said that true comfort is the absence of awareness. This sort of sense somehow that we only feel discomfort, that everything occurs sort of below the line effectively. And then when we achieve the conditions of comfort, we're no longer conscious of it or we're aware of it. But I'm not sure, and difficult as it is to disagree with the designer of the world's best-selling office chair that many have found comfort in. Other office chairs obviously are available, but as much as I don't want to disagree with Bill, I think comfort is something that we can be very conscious of, and it can actually elicit a very positive response in our body, in our mind. And it's something we can actually in the workplace seek out and deliberately look for and intentionally look for something that is comfortable and will register with us as being comfortable. I think that sort of lack of awareness comes when something is okay. We reach that sort of point where, look, it's not really offending me in any way, and I can stay in this seat or at this particular work setting for some time. But at some point in time, I'm probably going to have to change position, be mobile, move on. But that also reflects the fact that the current best advice, and I think it's completely sensible advice, is that we should move around a workplace. We should be mobile to a degree, appreciating that there are times where we do have to focus, you have to concentrate. We might be in a room with other colleagues, but that sort of that mobility during the course of the day is something that plays to our well-being anyway. So one hopes that we are moving from one comfortable work setting to another comfortable work setting as we are mobile in our workspace during the day.
Yeah, because mobility is important, isn't it? Because I know that it used to be well, I think there still is a lot of talk about posture, and it's based on sort of things like the DSC regulations that you get your posture right, and that's the main thing. And actually, that's, I think, for a number of years now we've kind of been questioning that rigid approach to well, not just comfort but ergonomic well-being. So it's the movement that's kind of important with that, both when you're sitting and when you're not.
We can't stop people using an ergonomic work setting in an unergonomic or a manner that is not necessarily helping them. look, even on a personal level, I can sit in the world's most ergonomic chair at a height adjustable workstation with everything set up around me as the guides and the manuals tell you have to, and I can guarantee you that I will find a way to sit in that chair in a manner that is not intended, or it's not designed for, because it just happens to work for me at that moment in time. Plus, I'm constantly fidgeting anyway. So, the sort of drawings in the display screen, equipment assessment, and training guides usually have you sitting completely upright with your arms out, forearms out, in a position that just feels entirely unnatural anyway. So again, around sort of the design of work settings has to reflect the fact as well that human beings will not necessarily use them as intended. Can the design of the work setting reflect sort of various types of use, and can it allow some optionality within it in order for people to find their own degree of comfort within it?
But that is the way that design prompts people to find a place that is, or a setting that is comfortable for them. I mean, your backdrop there is the Sage office in Porto, brand
That's
spanking
right.
new,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
imagine.
Yep.
I know you're not there, but I imagine it smells very new as well.
You you can
but
almost smell that newness from the image, can't you? You just know that it's going to be
smelly
like that.
vision, yeah. Um, so it's, but that's something that you've aimed to do in those new offices for Sage around the world, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a range of work settings. We focus on ergonomics. I think there's been a trend in the design industry for the last decade or so that sort of, with using that, you could probably term it as sort of nudge theory, but using that sense that, if we intend a work setting to be something that colleagues will only use for a short time, that we make it less comfortable. We don't put any padding in the seat, and the back support's not up to much, but you're only going to be there for 5 or 10 minutes because we want you to move on. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that, and we try to make sure in the workplaces we're creating that's a personal decision, and not something that we should, as designers, be determining, or we shouldn't be laying down some kind of law about how long you can stay in a space. If a work setting works for you and you're happy working there and you're comfortable in that work setting, then it should be up to you how long you stay in it. So when we're creating a choice of work settings, we try and make sure that every single one of those work settings would allow you to spend as long as you want in that work setting, because it's supportive and it's comfortable, and it's playing to your well-being.
Yeah. But I always remember one of the most famous examples of that sort of behavior from management that you described about trying to determine how people work was Chiat Day. You've probably seen this back in the
Yeah, yeah,
1990s,
yeah.
it was, where they produced this amazing, you'd have to go and see it to understand what it was. I mean, you've seen it. Um, this amazing, basically activity-based working environment for people. But then Jay Chiat, who was obviously the founder of the firm, was really frustrated that he'd given people these choices and they weren't making the right ones. So he would just be going around annoying everybody by saying to them, "You were here yesterday. Why aren't you using that workstation today?
Yeah,
Why haven't you
yeah.
moved?"
Yeah, and if one or two people, or even more, sort of tend to be in the same place all the time and do the same things, the workplace is not going to fail in some way. It's not going to fall over because some people don't behave as the sort of the concept design required people to behave. I think we make too much of that, and whilst we want people to be as mobile within the space as possible and to sit and work in different spaces, experiment, try new things, we do respect people's decisions and judgment as to where to work and what works best for them, depending on what they're doing and who they actually want to be working with as well. Because it's not just the activity; it's the company we're keeping, and it's those colleagues that we need to work with too.
But I think in the book you point out that sometimes, I mean, I think you distinguish them in the book actually. That comfort is not the same thing as control, although they're often used interchangeably. By control, you're referring to issues like acoustic and thermal comfort in particular,
Yeah.
which are obviously very contentious issues in any workplace.
Um,
So,
I, I I said the other day, you can either change your work setting, or you can change your work setting, and to which the response was a sort of kind of what you're talking about. So you can either change the work setting in terms of moving things around, or remodeling what you have in front of you. And I think, again, another thing that, collectively as workplace designers and creators, we've sort of wanted to see more opportunities for reconfiguration and sort of user interaction with spaces, but it hasn't always played out in the way we want to. Or you can change your work setting in terms of actually getting up or moving to another work setting. So actually change your location. So realistically, as long as you've got the opportunity to do either, change your work setting or change your work setting, then we're essentially providing the landscape for people to use the space in ways that work for them.
I think in the book you use the word comfort quite precisely to mean physical comfort, don't you, rather than control, which you see as a slightly separate issue.
Yeah, I mean that degree of control is being exercised by changing your work setting or changing your work setting, and potentially then, if there's a temperature adjustment or some other sort of comfort thermal conditions can be, or you either in a more open space, you either have the opportunity to change those conditions yourself, or someone who can, or a process for getting them changed for you. And that's just part of sort of setting it up and changing the first of the changing of the work settings in terms of you're not just moving pieces of furniture around potentially, but you're actually changing the environment around you in order to make it more comfortable for you. But I've sort of since the book really developed the sort of the idea, I think that it's a sort of, there's a psychological comfort here as well. It's how comfortable does it feel? What sort of information am I getting back from that environment? We could put the most ergonomic furniture in a physical space and really look at maximizing physical comfort, but there might just be something wrong with it, either from the sort of point of view of the lighting, or the degree of lighting, the temperature of the lighting, which is often overlooked. There's just something not quite right, and we just feel that something isn't working for us, even though potentially everything that had to go into the thinking and the design behind the work settings is right. So we do have to pair that psychological comfort, which is more about the overall design of the workspace and the sort of the architecture of the workspace, along with the sort of the physical comfort that we're trying to achieve as well.
And I mean, obviously, the book's also very much focused on the user, which is, I think, a characteristic of how you think about these things. And it strikes me that one of the main elements of the conversation about workplace at the moment is about providing a great experience for people. And I know that's always been an issue for you, but I think it's now mainstream, isn't it? The firm should be looking to do that, especially if they want them back in the office more.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that whole sort of change to the focus on the experience came from, because it feels to me like it's always been there. If we haven't been, 30 years ago, we were still focused on the experience of the occupants of a space. But I think we just talk about it more now. We're more conscious of it, and we like to put, we like these little phrases thrown into what we do. We like to feel in some way that we're sort of changing our approach. I do think, though, that since the pandemic, the bar has been raised. The quality, the expectation, the quality expectation of those using workspace has increased, in terms of the physical space, the location of that space, the quality of the services that are delivered. The expectations are much higher, because to a degree the workplace is having to earn it, and that's no bad thing. If it's the whole basis of the elemental workplace was a drive to increase the quality of the workplace across the world for everyone. And if it's if a byproduct of the pandemic is that the bar has been raised and that we're trying harder to create fantastic workplaces, then as long as we are creating them, that's a valid outcome.
As the book was written just before the pandemic. Was that? I'm trying to remember now.
I wrote it in 2017 and it was published in 2018. 18. So it's a few years
a
before
couple of
all of
years
that
before.
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But it struck me rereading it to ahead of this interview. That a lot of it is still very, very relevant, isn't it? That you're looking to sort of update your thinking on this kind of thing as well, aren't you? To keep it ahead of the game.
Yeah, I've tested it on several occasions. Tested it in the middle of the pandemic, when, of course, the prevailing narrative, depending on which channels you read, but was that the office was finished. Another one of those little periods in time where its demise has been a little bit sort of predicted, but not necessarily come to pass. And I test it all the time. I use a lot of what I've actually written and published in my day-to-day work anyway, and I definitely use the principles of the 12 elements, and the focus on those 12 elements, and in particular the focus on how colleagues will interact with and relate to our workplace, and make sure that every little detail is thought of. Something that I'm not sure necessarily is overtly stated in the elemental workplace, and possibly might need to be in the future, is that it is, the detail is incredibly important. We go from sort of our workplace concepts that during the design process a lot of time and effort is put into to the nitty gritty in a very short time. And colleagues are just as interested in where their team is going to sit as they are the sort of design thinking behind the whole space. And where am I going to put my stuff? These are really important considerations. We have to sweat the small stuff, and we can never lose sight of the detail, which comes back to comfort again.
There's still a tendency, I think, for firms to look at um, solutions like free coffee or something like that. I know that's a sort of bit of a sort of cliched, you know, a way of looking about this, but you add certain features into the office. It's the cargo cult approach, isn't it? And that will get people to come back. And it's not. But what you're saying is actually there's a lot of things to think about, not just a particular features of the office.
There was a head of a very cool hotel chain who, a few years back, someone asked in an interview whether this particular hotel chain offered free Wi-Fi, and he said, "Well, why wouldn't I? I'm not going to charge you for toilet paper." And I talked about the sort of the bar being raised in terms of expectations. Really good quality coffee for free is an expectation. It's not necessarily going to be the thing that makes you, put on proper clothes in the morning and get on a train to go to the office, but it's an expectation for when you're there. And we have to make sure that all those things that are an expectation of normal office life today are met, are provided well, and are available at all times. And that's just the nature of how we have progressed and developed in the last few years, is that we are now providing a higher level quality of offer in terms of the environment and the services we offer than we probably were before the pandemic.
I think that's great. Unless you've got something to add.
I'm happy with that.
Good. Okay. Well, we will treat that as the final word then. Neil, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.